The film begins in a convent where Sister Mary, a young nun, is deep in prayer. After finishing her devotions, she sneaks into the senior nun's room to steal some keys with plans to escape. When she struggles to open the gate, she decides to squeeze through the bars instead. However, during her attempt to flee, she is caught by one of 3 hooded figures, resulting in a painful injury to her leg that causes her to scream. Overcome by agony, she passes out, only to awaken buried alive. Meanwhile, Sister Cecilia arrives in the beautiful Italian countryside for a new role arranged by Father Tedeschi. She's warmly welcomed and introduced to a special convent where sick nuns spend their last days under Sister Isabel's guidance. Although Sister Isabel appears irritated, she shows Cecilia to her room. Despite Isabel's subtle hints to reconsider, Cecilia is determined to stay. As she settles in, she befriends Sister Gwen and prepares for an upcoming ceremony. Cecilia is excited to reconnect with Father Tedeschi at the event and shares her own story of survival from a near-drowning incident at age 12. Having been given a second chance at life, Cecilia feels a calling to fulfill a higher purpose, which leads her to enthusiastically accept Father Tedeschi's invitation to the convent. After the ceremony, while in the bathroom, she hears a distant cry resonating through the halls. Curious, she follows the sound and finds a distressed nun praying and crying. Trying to comfort her, Cecilia is shocked when the nun turns to reveal a blank face. Just then, the Reverend Mother steps in, leading Cecilia to the altar and presenting an old nail believed to be from Jesus Christ's crucifixion. The Reverend Mother shows Cecilia a hand with a hole similar to Christ's, declaring it a sign of forgiveness for her sins. Overwhelmed, Cecilia faints. When she wakes up, she seeks guidance from the cardinal, but is met with silence. Desperate, she calls out, only to be suddenly surrounded and bound by hooded figures. Terrified, she jolts awake, her eyes locked on the door, where a shadowy figure approaches. Flipping on the light, she sees no one. At breakfast, the Reverend Mother speaks to the group, while Cecilia chats cheerfully with Gwen. Observing their lightheartedness, the Reverend Mother gently reprimands them, marking their initiation into the convent's rules. Despite their duties, Cecilia and Gwen enjoy their time together, caring for an elderly nun. In her final moments, Cecilia meets Sister Isabel's gaze, which quickly disappears behind a passing sheet. That night, an older nun unexpectedly cuts Cecilia's hair, leaving her confused. She walks the nun back to the infirmary without pondering it too much, and notices a cross-shaped scar on the nun's feet. The next day, Cecilia finds herself bathing with the other young nuns. Gwen shared her experience of entering the convent. She talked about her difficult past with an abusive ex-boyfriend and how she ultimately stood up to him before finding refuge in the convent. Observing the calm life of the nuns who had their basic needs met, Gwen felt a pull towards their lifestyle, even if her commitment to God wasn't as strong as that of her fellow sisters. As Gwen spoke, Cecilia listened closely, but soon started to feel ill. She excused herself for a checkup and noticed a strange figure watching her from outside. A sudden movement startled her when a bird fell at her feet. Cecilia was then called to the cardinal's office for questioning. The cardinal asked if she had broken her vows before joining the convent, while Father Tedeschi, mistaking Cecilia's confusion for reluctance, pressed her to confess. Despite the pressure, Cecilia firmly stated that she had never broken her promise to God, leaving everyone in shock. Father Tedeschi, confused, asked if she had been involved with anyone intimately. Cecilia, a virgin with no romantic history, firmly denied the claims. To their surprise, a doctor's examination revealed that she was pregnant. The cardinal and Father Tedeschi interpreted this news as a miracle, believing Cecilia to be akin to a modern-day Virgin Mary. While they celebrated this perceived blessing, Sister Isabel and Gwen did not share in the joy. As Cecilia entered her second trimester, she began to experience odd symptoms. After a bout of vomiting, she discovered that one of her teeth had fallen out. In the dining room, everyone greeted her warmly, except Gwen, who remained seated until Cecilia was settled. A senior nun offered Cecilia her breakfast, advising her to avoid excessive movement while pregnant. Although Gwen outwardly complained about the nun's strictness, she was deeply concerned for her friend. After breakfast, Cecilia took a bath, but was suddenly pushed underwater. It was Isabel who was trying to drown her. A senior nun rushed in to help, pulling Isabel away as she angrily proclaimed that Cecilia deserved what was happening. The doctor quickly examined Cecilia, assuring Father Tedeschi that the baby was unharmed, but Cecilia felt shaken and confused by the attack. She recounted Isabel's troubling words and struggled to understand Isabel's jealousy. Father Tedeschi comforted her, attributing Isabel's actions to envy, and reassured Cecilia of her safety. Yet, still traumatized, Cecilia insisted on getting a second opinion from an outside doctor. Even though she was worried about losing a tooth from vomiting, Father Tedeschi dismissed her concern, claiming she was fine. After the incident with Isabel, Cecilia became more watchful, suspecting her fellow nuns. One day in the corridor, she noticed two nuns staring intently out a window. Suddenly, a figure jumped from the rooftop, and as Cecilia rushed to see, it was Isabel. As they solemnly accompanied the other nuns to bury Isabel, Gwen leaned close to Cecilia and urged her to recognize the truth. Trust within the convent was delicate. Gwen, who rarely shared her thoughts with anyone, saw Cecilia's troubles as proof of hidden secrets among the convent's leaders. Father Tedeschi intervened when he noticed their tense exchange. He asked about their worries, but Gwen exploded with anger, criticizing the lack of concern for Isabel's passing and attacking the institution and its authority figures. Father Tedeschi and the deacon, along with Zoe, had to restrain her. Cecilia was sitting on her bed when a picture frame loosened from the wall, nearly falling. Behind it, she discovered a Bible verse written in Italian. It was from 2 Corinthians, chapter 11, verse 14. Intrigued, she looked up the verse in her English Bible and read that Satan often disguises himself as an angel of light. This made Cecilia question Gwen's claims more. Quietly, she entered Gwen's empty room. Not giving up, she slipped into the cardinal's office and searched through her files. There, she found a newspaper article about the accident she had narrowly avoided. A sudden scream made her jump, and she carefully approached the source, peering through a keyhole. Tears filled her eyes as she saw a faceless nun cutting off Gwen's tongue. As she backed away, another sickly nun covered her mouth, stifling any outcry. This was the same nun who had cut her hair. With a disturbing smile, she handed Cecilia a cross made with her hair. Desperate for help, Cecilia begged the nun to assist in their escape, but received a chilling reply. No one leaves the convent. One morning, nurses were abruptly awakened by Cecilia's cries as she rushed to her room with Father Tedeschi. They found a shocking scene. Cecilia was bleeding heavily, pleading with Father Tedeschi for aid. Fearing for her life, Father Tedeschi decided to take her to the nearest hospital. However, the truth soon unfolded. A nurse, alert to unusual scents from the blood, discovered a hidden bag under the bed. Instead of human blood, it contained that of a dead chicken. While en route to the hospital, Father Tedeschi received a call that revealed Cecilia's trickery. She had faked a miscarriage to escape. Realizing she had been caught, Cecilia tried to run from the vehicle, but was quickly stopped by Father Tedeschi due to her weakness. Back at the convent, a senior nun reprimanded her severely, bathing her roughly while scolding her for attempting to flee. When Cecilia dared to respond, the nun slapped her face hard. Cecilia was then bound to a wheelchair in front of an altar displaying the crucifixion. Father Tedeschi, wearing gloves, took a nail from the crucifixion display and presented it to her, explaining his long-planned scheme. Before becoming a priest, Father Tedeschi had worked as a geneticist. Utilizing his knowledge of genetics, he began a secret project to extract DNA from a crucifixion nail in order to create a new Jesus Christ. After 2 decades of unsuccessful attempts, Cecilia's involvement became a significant moment, leading to the successful development of a new Virgin Mary, who was meant to give birth to this reimagined Jesus. Father Tedeschi guided Cecilia to the basement, where he showed her rows of jars filled with fetuses. Only a few looked normal, while the rest had severe deformities. Father Tedeschi took Cecilia into another room, where his assistant, DeConzo, brutally restrained her leg. Then, Father Tedeschi burned Cecilia's feet with a branding iron in the shape of a cross. Afterward, she was locked in a room to prevent her from escaping again. In the last months of her pregnancy, Cecilia spoke with the cardinal while removing a nail from her finger. A doctor checked on her baby one last time before leaving her in the care of the Reverend Mother. While the Reverend Mother was focused on the baby, Cecilia quietly grabbed the crucifix and struck her. As Cecilia left her room, she fought against the pain of labor. Meanwhile, the cardinal sat smoking a cigarette, distracted by the choir's performance. Unbeknownst to him, Cecilia crept up and strangled him with her rosary. Dr. Gallows discovered what happened and fled in fear. Cecilia hurried to the basement, splashing ethanol around Father Tedeschi's lab and lighting a lighter just as he appeared. In pain, she bent over, providing him a moment to act, but she quickly struck him with a flask and escaped, locking him inside. Father Tedeschi grabbed her hair, trying to pull her back. In her struggle, Cecilia fought to free herself, but he held her tight. With determination, she dropped her lighter, igniting a fire that consumed Father Tedeschi and the lab. Nevertheless, he managed to break free, while Cecilia hurried down the stairs into the catacombs beneath the convent. Desperately looking for an exit, fear filled her as she heard someone calling her name. Panic surged through her as she illuminated the chamber, revealing Gwen's body. She quickly fled, spotting sunlight shining through an opening big enough for her to crawl through. Just as she was about to escape, Father Tedeschi stopped her, attempting to take her baby. Despite the pain, Cecilia gathered her strength, grabbing the crucifixion nail and plunging it into Father Tedeschi. With fierce resolve, she crawled through the opening. Outside, she fell to her knees, screaming as she delivered her baby into the world. Cecilia was horrified by what she saw. Although the details of her child were unclear, she realized with dread that her baby had become something monstrous, evident from its eerie, human-like sounds. Without thinking, Cecilia bit through the umbilical cord and picked up a nearby rock, taking out her fear as she struck down the terrible creature. And that concludes the story.